Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996. Welcome back to the Gay Buddhist Fellowship. Our format is that we typically go around and introduce ourselves first before we introduce our speaker. Just by a show of hands, is there anyone here for the first time or returning after a long absence? Welcome. We have a 20 to 30 minute social period afterwards, so we invite you to stay. And as we go around the room and say our names, we'll try and remember yours so we can welcome you into the conversation. I'll start. My name is Tom Bruein.
My name is Jim.
Douglas Hall.
David Lewis.
My name is Freddie.
I'm Kei Matsuda.
Evan.
Robert.
Michael.
Kaleo.
Bob Sirukan.
Marshall.
John Morales.
My name is Michael.
David.
Ian.
I'm Henry Rubinoids.
Andre.
I'm Lee Robbins.
I'm Jim Stewart.
Amos.
Silva. My name is David. My name is Clint.
I'm Jack Busby.
Steve Carson. My name is Brian.
My name is Jeff.
My name is Gage.
Thomas Waldo. My name is Jerry Jones.
My name is Darcy.
I'm Richard Amlani. I'm Patrick.
Peter.
I'm Jerry.
Steven.
Yes, Aaliyah.
My name is Roy.
My name is Michael. I'm Gerald.
Ralph.
I'm Shantanu Puka.
I'm Ray Dyer.
Did we miss anyone? Oh, back here.
I'm Jeff.
My name is Mark.
Hank. Great. Welcome, everyone. Our speaker today is Alzak Amlani. Alzak has been practicing Buddhism for 20 years, and in the last 10 years has been a student of the Diamond Approach. He is a practicing psychologist and teaches in the Integral Counseling Program at the California Institute of Integral Studies, where his work focuses on integrating spiritual approaches and multiculturalism into psychotherapy. He is of Indian origin and grew up in Uganda, East Africa. Alzak, welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here, and thank you for inviting me to be here with you and to give a little talk and share one of the themes that I find is really challenging and important and a continuous process of uncovering on the spiritual journey. And that is the tension and union of opposites that we contend with all the time in our lives. The opposites of masculine and feminine, the inner, the outer, introversion versus extroversion, the sun and the moon, form and emptiness, and we could just keep going on and on and on. And so what I want to talk about is how these are such a part of our lives, and how when we are aware of these parts of us, how they can feel contradictory or challenging, and the tendency in us to want to dichotomize or polarize, to move to one side or the other. And the challenge in opening up to aspects of us that feel like opposite or difficult to integrate, and how we can begin to work with that a little bit more, which is most of you in your own ways have thought about this, and I'm sure contend with this and have ways that you try and bring integration to the range of experiences that you have. So my understanding from early developmental psychology is that this process of good and bad begins very early. The child is driven by the pleasure principle of wanting pleasure and avoiding pain. And when there's gratification of the breast or being fed or being held or being safe or being connected, then the child experiences a sense of pleasure and gratification, and all is well, and it even goes to a sense of bliss. And then when mother or father or the caregiver isn't as available, or it's cold, or there's a lot of noise, then the child begins to feel uncomfortable, and there's pain in there, and wants to avoid that pain, and begins to also project onto mother or primary caretaker as bad mother or bad object. And if there's a lot of bad experiences, then the child has a difficult time seeing the mother or the caregiver as good and bad, because that's what usually most people are, and struggles with the integration of the two, good and bad. So there's a tendency to split. Mother becomes all bad, or the child feels like he or she is all bad, and the mother is all good, so there's a tendency to idealize and to split. And those kinds of difficulties happen where the parent isn't seen as both gratifying and not gratifying, loving and at times not loving. So part of maturation for a child is to actually try and integrate, beginning with the primary caregiver, those two aspects of reality. And we can also see in our own lives when we feel accepted by somebody or wanted by somebody, we see them as loving or caring, or we like them. And when they reject us, or there's a misunderstanding, we could go into, seeing them as negative, or disliking them, or not seeing the positive that's also there. There's a tendency to dichotomize people, what's called splitting and rejecting. So Thich Nhat Hanh has a really powerful poem about this I wanted to share. It's called Call Me By My True Names, and I'll just share portions of it. Do not say that I'll depart tomorrow, because even today I still arrive. I still arrive in order to laugh and to cry, in order to fear and to hope. The rhythm of my heart is birth and death of all that are alive. I am the mayfly metamorphosizing on the surface of the river, and I am the bird which, when spring comes, arrives in time to eat the mayfly. I am the frog swimming happily in the clear pond, and I am also the grass snake who, approaching in silence, feeds itself on the frog. I am the child in Uganda, all skin and bones, my legs as thin as bamboo sticks, and I am the arms merchant selling deadly weapons to Uganda. I am the 12-year-old girl, refugee on a small boat, who throws herself into the ocean after being raped by a sea pirate. And I am the sea pirate, my heart not yet capable of seeing and loving. My joy is like spring, so warm it makes flowers bloom in all the walks of my life. My pain is like a river of tears, so full it fills the 4 oceans. Please call me by my true names, so I can hear all my cries and laughs at once, so I can see that my joy and pain are one. Please call me by my true names, so I can wake up, so the door of my heart can be left open, the door of compassion. So as you can hear, Thich Nhat Hanh is really inviting us to recognize these different aspects of us and how important it is on the spiritual journey to open up to what Jung calls sort of the shadow, parts of us that are difficult to own, and how quickly we project evil or negativity or aggression onto others. And that process of coming home or wholeness is to begin to retrieve those parts of us that we have projected out and to have some sort of a relationship with them. And that to really be seen is to actually see all these aspects of us. And as you know, that's quite a process of digesting previous experiences and biases and our idealization of how we should be and our own challenges with how we actually are, you know. And so part of how I see the spiritual journey is to create some sort of a ground and some sort of a space where we can look at what's arising in us that we have trouble with, that we're challenged by, that doesn't fit our image, and to form some sort of relationship with those aspects of us. So Jung had a woman in his life, a student of a sort, who was challenged by demands of career and family in her life. And she was communicating with Jung around how conflicted she was in her personal life, in her career life as well. And I'd like to read a paragraph of his response to her. Dear Frau Frobe, there can be no resolution, only patient endurance of opposites, which ultimately spring from your own nature. You yourself are a conflict that rages in itself and against itself. In order to melt its incompatible substances, the male and the female, in the fire of suffering, and thus create that fixed and unalterable form which is the goal of life. We are crucified between the opposites and delivered up to the torture until the reconciling third takes shape. Do not doubt the rightness of the two sides within you, and let whatever may happen, happen. The apparently unendurable conflict is proof of the rightness of your life. A life without inner contradiction is either only half a life, or else a life in the beyond, which is destined only for angels. But God loves human beings more than the angels. With kindest regards, C.J. Jung. So I'd like to just open it up a little bit and see if there's any comments or questions that anybody wants to share or ask at this point. Yeah.
I'm a middle school teacher, and a lot of our troubled kids, I notice something that they do. If I say, Jason, please take out a sheet of paper, because he hasn't, he'll say, am I bad? They just go there, am I bad? And I won't play that. I said, that's not what I said. Mm-hmm. And now I've got this game about, you could say, I'm not skillful. But I won't go, they go there.
Yeah.
And they're 10 and 11, am I bad? He must say that to himself 5 times in my class. So already he's got this split off. There's no good or bad. He just goes to that place where he's bad.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's sad to hear that how quickly he does go there. And obviously there's something in his history, probably at home, where he's been seen as bad or has experienced.
And you do what you can in that one moment. You hope that you could say, no, I'm not, that's not what I said. Mm-hmm. You don't know where that goes, but you just trust. I may have planted a seed.
Yeah, I would suspect that you have, in the fact that you can hold some ground where you're not sort of seeing in this bad or good. It's not even about bad or good.
Right.
You know, it's about.
I won't play that.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. No.
So I have a question for you, but I'll just preface it by saying that my own background is my father was a German Jew and escaped from Hitler, survivor of the Holocaust, and saved his family. And so I grew up with stories of the Holocaust. And when I first came to the Bay Area, for many years I was very conflicted about being Jewish with a German heritage, German background. And I wanted to study German, and I studied German, and I went to Germany. And I constantly struggled with many of my parents' family. Friends were Jews, American Jews primarily. They criticized my parents for letting me study in Germany. And I won't go into a long story, but I was very conflicted for a long time. And when I came to the Bay Area, I participated in a series of workshops on reconciliation between Germans and Jews. It was a very powerful experience for me. And I was in a group with 10 children of victims of the Holocaust survivors and 10 children of high-ranking Nazis for a significant period of time, and I worked through a lot of stuff. And my question for you is, we were told in this workshop over and over and over that there's a victim and a perpetrator in all of us. So that's my question for you, Alzak. Do you believe that there's a victim and a perpetrator in all of us? And if so, why do you believe that?
Yeah, I think I do believe that. I think that we've all been hurt and therefore felt victimized in some way or another. And I think there's a natural response to that, which is of some sort of anger or aggression, unless you're very evolved or that hurt has been really healed and dealt with, through our parents or whoever hurt us, or in some ways. I think it's a natural response to feel some sort of anger or aggression. And it just depends on how often that happens and how unrepaired that is in the environment and your history and your personality and all those different aspects of our lives that then determine how much of the perpetrator that we identify with and how unrestrained that is. So that's how I see it.
So what you were talking about just reminded me of a brief snippet I heard on NPR some time ago, in which they were interviewing somebody who'd written about Cesar Chavez, and that person told the story that somebody said to Cesar Chavez, "This lieutenant of yours is so wonderful, so selfless, so caring, how wonderful." And Cesar Chavez said, "Yes, that is all true, but if he lived up there in that house on the hill, he would be just like the graveyard owner." And the other thing that occurred to me is that I've quoted this poem frequently also, or parts of it, that it may be relatively easy for us to say and think to ourselves, "I'm also the pirate." But I wonder how many of us can say to ourselves, "I am the Republican running for president in Florida."
You're asking too much for me. We'd be luckier.
I think for me that brings up the question of what are our leaders holding that is really part of a collective that we haven't fully owned and worked with and digested and integrated and brought into some relationship with. So, yeah.
I think a lot of these questions that people are asking, the ideas, on a theoretical sense, they make a lot of sense to me. Although I'm not quite sure I agree with the Jungian idea that there's a fixed reconciliation of the two. I think that there's an unfixed reconciliation.
I would agree with that, yeah.
But sometimes the problem with kind of relativism in terms of seeing the good and evil in everyone, the good and evil in everything, and saying, are the good and bad, or even separating good person, bad person from good action, bad action, you know, saying maybe Stalin is not necessarily a bad person, Stalin did bad things, although he did some good things, blah, blah, blah. How do you identify that? I think for me the biggest problem is not that, thinking of it theoretically, but in terms of right action. What actions do I want to take given maybe my belief that things are so relative and that we're all a combination of good and evil? And in the case of the politicians right now, you know, do I just sit back and say, yeah, well, Newt Gingrich is sometimes nice and sometimes nasty, or do I do something that I call right action, and do something about what I feel strongly about, regardless of whether, regardless of what I see. You know what I mean? I don't know how you do. How do you see our action based on this understanding, the theoretical understanding of this?
Yeah, and that's a good question. I think for me, it's this understanding helps me not project as much onto another, and to be able to see, have more understanding of why a person might be the way they are and why they take the actions they take. So there's just more perspective and more understanding and more capacity to hold. And then, you know, what's right action based on that? What do I want? What are my values? What is more compassionate? You know, I think it's those questions that then help me participate in a way that has integrity for me in the world. So. Yeah.
Back when Bush was president, I did, just for a very little while, sing that for him, or towards him, and it really wasn't about him, of course, but it was about my relationship with myself ultimately, and in terms of, you know, the parts of me or the actions for which I'm not, you know, proud or any of that. And I think that for me it gives, you know, the perspective, but also helps develop the compassion. And I think that helps us see more clearly, and then decide from that with what's actually going on, what's the right action. But it's been a valuable practice for me.
So what I'd like to do is, yeah.
I was just going to say that regarding right action, I think there have been times when I've been conscious of trying to take the right action, taking into consideration that dichotomy, not going one way or the other, seeing the multiple aspects of a person or a situation. What's come up for me lately, one of the biggest challenges for me is, okay, so I take the right action, supposedly, and it gives no results. It leaves things apparently as they were, and a lot of comes up at that point. It's like right action doesn't necessarily result in a significant
the right result, yeah.
Things. Maybe down the line, or maybe in subtle ways, but there's that frustration that comes up.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's this, as Krishna sort of said, that you know, we act with our fullness and with passion and vigor, and we also let go and do not be attached to the outcome. And that's a difficult way to be in the world, because when we're so passionate, we're also pretty attached. And sometimes a lot of our passion comes out of what we want and our attachments rather than really something else, you know. So I wanted to give you a chance to do a little bit of inquiry in dyads and to look at the question for yourself, which is to personalize it and to really bring it home. What is alive for you as you're contending with dichotomy or opposites in your inner or outer life? What's coming up for you? What's most alive for you right now? And what is your relationship to this pair of opposites? You know, do you hate it? Do you want to resolve it? Do you want to split? What are you doing with that in your life? And have you ever had the experience where this contradiction or these opposites, somehow you're able to hold both, or there's some reconciliation, or there's some wholeness that happens as you've been working with it and sitting with it? And what does that feel like, and how does that transform you? So it's a big question. Take the piece that most speaks to you, and you're not going to be able to answer or finish the whole thing. But I just want to kind of open it up as an inquiry. Are there any questions about that particular inquiry? Yeah.
Yeah, how long do you
Oh, yeah. So each person gets 5 minutes to just share, like a monologue. And then you'll have like 2 or 3 minutes for your partner to just respond, ask a question, clarification, to help you kind of go deeper or to just share what they heard. Okay? So maybe just pair up with somebody close to you, and I'll let you know when it's 5 minutes. Okay. So we have about 10 minutes. I'd love to hear what you discovered, what happened for you in this the dialogue with the other. Anybody wants to share?
For me, what I noticed is that it's a very kind of deep and radical acceptance of whatever energies are coming up in me. It's a big part of the process of reconciliation. To not, just like the baby pulls away from the non-gratification, you know, I pull away from what I don't want to look at in myself. So, you know, to just really breathe into that, to have the meditation, the experience of meditation is very much like that for me. The kind of expansion of consciousness so that you're just witnessing, this is part of me too.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that mindfulness, particularly meditation, which is so much about being present to whatever is arising and noticing it, is like a foundation practice for this work. So,
I was talking about the dichotomy for me of trying to change aspects of the world and of myself in order to lessen suffering in the world and my own personal suffering. First, coming to peace with the way things are and just sitting with it and being okay with my relationship to the world. And you know, I go back and forth. I know that as a person I'll always be trying to have better relationships, to find things in life that are more interesting to do and more enjoyable, to date more, or to whatever I think is, do more volunteer work, whatever what I think is going to bring more fulfillment. But I know that also it's kind of an internal journey of my relationship with things and just kind of coming to peace with it. And so I go back and forth. I know I'm always going to be doing that, but I know it's not also the answer.
Yeah.
So it's interesting where to sit with it. Sometimes you feel, sometimes I could get paralyzed. Really, should I do something or do nothing? You know?
Yeah, that's well said. I think just the fact that you're sitting with that and really looking at that process in itself creates some sort of capacity to hold both. I think there's something about holding both in even the tension and even the paralysis, because there's awareness there. And I think is our striving coming out of rejection? I think that's the question that comes up for me as you're sharing this. You know, is our desire to do all the things that you're talking about, is it coming out of a pushing away of some experience or some aspect of you or where you are now? Or does it include the embracing and then expanding? That's kind of how I think about it. Yeah, Clint.
I just want to follow up on that. Sometimes it's very hard to know when you should embrace and when you should confront. I hear stories like about a Jewish family being persecuted by neo-Nazi and welcomed into their home and wins them over and he stops believing what he used to believe. But there's also a time where you just got to say, I'm not going to be, sweetness and lightness is not the appropriate response at this moment. You know, I'm just going to go in there and knock heads with what's going on here. And it's very difficult sometimes to decide which, another thing about it is that when you knock heads, there's a certain amount of red energy, of exhilaration, of this adrenaline rush. And self-righteousness is a wonderful emotion to feel because it makes you feel good. So you have all this stuff going on. There's like a genuine trying to confront something that you think is doing harm versus all these emotions about the thrill of the battle and the thrill of being in your mind better than this person and so on. So my own point is it's very confusing for me. I don't know sometimes which is the appropriate way to respond.
Yeah, so there is the warrior, the Shambhala warrior, or a clean expression of standing up for something and confronting something, abuse or, whatever, hatred or discrimination. I think there is that. And for that to be clean, I think requires a fair amount of self-investigation also.
Right. And there's one
for it to not create more suffering.
There's one line that certain Christians use that drives me crazy, but it's all inappropriate. It's like, love the sinner, hate the sin. I mean, when I hear that, it's just like nails on a chalkboard. But if you take it out of context about being on the receiving end of homophobia, there is some wisdom in that, but it's very hard to achieve that.
Absolutely. It's very hard. It's lifelong. Yeah. It's a spiritual practice, obviously, yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think your whole discussion and presentation is wonderful, and if you left me another 6 hours with him, I'd be cured, Very good. Because almost everything can be brought down to this two sides, pulling on it and not sure, where things are. But I think it's a great beginning, and hopefully we'll be more.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
One of the things that challenges me most when I'm not thinking about the reality of this duality that we're talking about is, for me, I have, like many people, I have all these memories from the past, childhood past, hurt, child was a victim of no control, growing up competent person who has control of a lot. And sometimes where I'm challenged is when something isn't going well, the old baggage, the past, begins to raise itself. And rather than sort of look at that in the context, well, there's a duality, it's just like where I used to be now, it means this comes up for me, and if this is where I am now, rather than do that, I very often focus on resisting the experience of that darker side. And in resisting it, it all becomes about the dark side, and resisting it, and the positive part of the duality sort of gets increasingly minimized. So it's really it's very helpful. It's very helpful to sort of once again consider the fact that it's just the duality.
Yeah.
And all the stuff is like there. And so how do you do that in a mindful way? How do you deal with those realities in a mindful and constructive way?
Exactly. Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you for a wonderful presentation about issues that I thought about quite a bit. And, often my struggle is if I don't vacillate one way or the other, it's really about living and you don't know. And that's uncomfortable. It's an ongoing, but I had a particular question about your reading from Jung and that third reconciling other. If you could, address in briefly about that.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think my understanding of that is that as we continue to struggle, another function, what he calls a transcendent function, comes in that can hold those opposites and see the relationship between those opposites. And where there isn't the tension or there isn't the conflict, but it's seeing more the relationship and also how they need each other and how there's actually a complement. And it's sort of different keys of the same keyboard. And so there's an archetypal capacity in us to be able to go there. And sometimes when we're inquiring into these things, we can sometimes experience a leap that can happen. It feels like a leap, or some shift happens, and it's a non-dual space that opens up, where it isn't so much about resisting or privileging or projecting, but it's a kind of being with in a dance. And then it's like, whoa, it's kind of all one, it's all connected. And there's no judgment there. There's a capacity to just see the whole. There's been a question here.
Yeah, what came up for me in hindsight, looking back at my part of my show, is that it felt like I was trying to fix something. It was like, this is fix it. I could almost, in a sense, frame this whole conversation as about fixing something. And I just want to make that distinction because the notion of of awareness and intentionality about being aware of what is coming up for us and having an intention to move towards it, to take, to move into life and into certain exuberance, wherever that is, and just to bring up that distinction.
Yeah. Just a comment. First, to thank you very much, Alzak, for very thought-provoking and also feeling discussion and for sharing your teachings to bring me your wisdom. I feel this underlying current throughout what everyone is sharing of the harmony and disharmony between the mind and the heart. And I'm wondering if there's anything that you wanted to care to share about Buddhism in terms of these opposites.
Yeah, maybe we can end with, I'm sure we're at that point now, by the Buddhist teacher, I think, who speaks to this in some form, Lama Govinda. And he said, individuality and universality are not mutually exclusive values, but two sides of the same reality, compensating, fulfilling, and complementing each other, and becoming one in the experience of enlightenment. This experience does not dissolve the mind into an amorphous all, but rather brings the realization that the individual itself contains the totality focalized in its very core. And I think just to speak to you particularly, I think this culture, our culture generally, Euro-American culture, really privileges a particular kind of thinking, logical, linear, mental kind of processes. And in Sanskrit, there's a word called chitta, which means heart-mind. And so it's not dichotomized, but the wisdom of the heart and the thinking of the mind are connected, and is seen as one. So, yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much, Elsa.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any announcements? Lee?
I'd like to make an announcement. Some of you, probably many of you, knew Roger Corliss, our former member who's passed away, who was a academic and scholar at Duke and in Buddhism and Christianity. And some of you may know, or you may have even been interviewed by him, that he did a study at the Gay Buddhist Fellowship about a dozen years or so ago, which was published and presented and so forth. And actually, as a result of our discussion last small group session about fellowship, I teach a doctoral course in research at Golden Gate University, and the major activity of the students in that is to do a research project on some organization or topic during the semester. And so it occurred to me that perhaps there was someone who would be interested in updating Roger's study or taking it off into a further direction. And John Morales, could you raise your hand? So John was interested in doing that and has submitted a letter explaining it to GBF, which Ray and some other people have seen. And so will probably be meeting some of you and seeing if he can perhaps interview or talk with you and find out what it means in your life. And he's actually, I think, taking a somewhat spiritual perspective on its nature. And so I hope that it will be helpful, and maybe it will even encourage other groups like ours around the world, of which I think we're probably the leading gay Buddhist group in existence.
I'm not familiar with Roger's study. Just in a nutshell, what was the focus of the study?
What was the nature of the Gay Buddhist Fellowship? What brought people to it? What did they learn from it? Why were they members? Those sorts of things.
Thank you. Others? Jerry?
Hi. Thanks, Alzak, for coming today. Next week we'll have Kevin Griffin speaking. And then I have another announcement. GBF, our fellowship, GBS, Gay Buddhist Sangha, and San Francisco Zen Center, we all do a prison pen pal program. And we are looking for more people to write to prisoners. And it's confidential. You pretty much can do what you want to. We do try to keep it on a spiritual note. And if you're interested, you can see me. And also, I'm going to put on the Lassiter on the Yahoo group, Jim Shaplin. You can contact if you're interested in writing for a prisoner.
Well, it's newsletter mailing day today. We have a little less than 400 newsletters to process and get out, about 2/3 of which are for prisoners who have had some problems with right action, but they are our gay brothers. And so if 10 or 12 of us can gather, as we usually do every other month, then that'd be great to be able to get them together now. I'd like to see hands for commitment, please. That's great, thank you.
Others? Okay, well, we will have a social... Oh, do we have a host?
We have a host.
Oh, yes.
There are some cookies and dates out there. Please enjoy them. We have tea available. If you do have tea, please wash your cup out and put it in the drain. If you're interested in getting our newsletter, there's a sign-up sheet over here on the credenza. I will be coming around with the Donable, and I think the suggested donation is $5 to $8. So please be as generous as you like. And there's a group of people who often go out to eat that sometimes meet out by the door out on the street. And you might consider inviting someone to join your group. I think that's it.
Okay. So welcome to John and Amos. Please join us for refreshments and whatnot. As we gather in a circle, is there anyone who would like to read the dedication of merit? Which I have.
You would.
I will. By the power and truth of this practice, may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all be free from sorrow and the causes of sorrow. May all never be separated from the sacred happiness which is without sorrow. And may all live in equanimity, without too much attachment or too much aversion, believing in the equality of all that lives.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.